So I drove up through San Francisco yesterday, up to San Leandro to the tree failure conference. It was a good conference. It was primarily academia talking about tree risk and failures, and there was a lot of case studies. It was definitely worth going to, but it got me thinking about my climber's perspective, and that's what I want to talk about in this video today. There was a lot of great shots, a lot of things that really were eye-openers, a lot of good slides and presentations. But it was purely academia that was talking, and I really like to talk about what I see as a climber from up in the tree. Because most of these guys at the conference, and women, were talking about what they inspect when they go look at a failure. There was lots and lots of pictures of trees that went down. Was it caused by soil? Was it caused by past climbers' mistakes? And, in my day-to-day working, I'm constantly up in trees that have been worked on by people from the past. And this particular tree that I'm showing right now, it's a big live oak, Quercus agrifolia, and it was full of artifacts, history. I mean, there's a story to be told here. Look at these old cables. I mean, they aren't even galvanized cables. They're old, rusty cables. And the cabling job, it was horrible. I mean, I was looking at the way that it was put together, and it just didn't make any sense at all. And the cables were not attached correctly. There was, binders. There was even one cable that was not long enough, so they bound two cables together to make one, which is, just speaks of somebody in the past that really didn't know what they were doing. So I'm hoping that by taking you up in the trees with me and showing you what I see and how I make my tree decisions, that you can better understand, at least from my perspective, the process that I go through. A lot of climbers get up in a tree and they don't really know what they're going to do. They sort of haphazardly start cutting and cutting and cutting, and there's no rhyme or reason. Or somebody on the ground, sometimes it'll be the homeowner or the property owner, will say, the tree's too tall, just make it shorter, I need more sun, and they'll just work according to what they're directed rather than what the tree needs. And a lot of times we have to really look at our trees closely. One thing I always tell people is start off by looking at the base of the tree all the way around, 360 degrees. You've got to walk around and look for every little clue. Here we've got a little bit of evidence, which is very likely a Phytophthora of some sort. There's many types of Phytophthora, and there's also insect frass, piles of excrement from insect borers. These are all bad signs. Are there any hollows? Are there any, big spots of fungus? Are there any things that really, really scare you? And this tree was full of them. I mean, everywhere I looked, there was old wounds and old cavities. I think there was about 6 old cables up in this tree. And clearly this tree was from an old property prior to where the home is. So this predates the development. So, who knows what happened during the initial excavation and foundation work and development of the whole area of homes. There's another cable up there. I find it fascinating. I like to read the history of what happened to a tree. I look at all the wounds. I look at all the spots up in a tree, and I always try to do an inspection, a physical inspection of the cables to see how taut they are or how slack they are, because that tells you a lot as well. If it's too tight, if it plays a high C when you pluck it, you've got something going on. And in contrast, if it's too loose, that tells you that maybe something was lightened up or the tree is changing. And in this case, there were even cables that were snapped and just hanging up in the tree that were of no value whatsoever, but it tells a story. There was some mushrooms at the base of, this was actually the tree across the street. There was another equal-sized old live oak, and this one did have galvanized cables, but you can see clearly that It looks to me like the same company did it. They just upgraded their materials, but they didn't upgrade their techniques. All of the back wrapping was very, very sloppy. And anybody that takes pride in doing a cabling job would not do that kind of a cabling. So I'm walking around this particular tree, and I'm checking everything out. And I got the new 360-degree camera. I'm back on my job again, and I've got a long pole here. Sorry about the sun glare right there, but you've got a camera that catches everything. You catch the sun too. But with the new camera, I can put it on a long pole, and I can put it up in a tree and get other perspectives besides just from myself up in the tree. So this is kind of cool. I put it up on the pole, and I just kind of worked my way along a branch. I think you're going to see a lot of new perspectives with this new camera. I'm on the ground doing this actual inspection here with that camera way up on a pole. I have a lot of fun with my videos, but more importantly, I'm really trying hard to show you guys what I see and why I make my decisions. Every climber that gets up in a tree is going to make their own decisions. The owner of the company can say, here's what we got to do, but it's up to the person in the tree to make the final decisions. What are you going to cut, and why are you going to cut it? Look at this old cable here. It's not a great way to install a cable, but it seems to have held up for, I'm guessing these cables are at least 50 or 60 years old. That one doesn't have a whole lot of value to it. There's another cable that's interesting. The attachment was two cables were from a single spot, and when that single spot broke, both of the cables became redundant. And spurs, oh my gosh, everywhere I look, you can see evidence of old climbers that gouged their way up the tree. But 50 years ago, that was an accepted practice. People didn't think twice about doing that kind of work. Here's an interesting branch that I had to make a decision. I noticed it from the ground, but when I got up there, I recognized that it was better than halfway decayed all the way around, and there was a big wound at the end. It was still alive, but a lot of times I get up and I'm thinking, okay, would it benefit the tree to take this off? Would it take enough weight off of this entire branch to maybe possibly minimize a future breakage? I really looked it over close, and I made the decision to do it. I thought, okay, this limb, at the very least, hasn't got much longer before it becomes just a big chunk of deadwood up here. So I might as well take it out now and help reduce the overall weight of this entire limb. But you can see it was interesting. The top portion was still alive, but the bottom was really rotted. So I decided to take it off. Had a lot of branches that were extending out quite a ways. So there's the first cut, and it shows you it's better than, it's probably 40% rotted on the bottom there, and the top was still alive. But note that the decay is all on the bottom side of this branch. And then as I got further on, here's the next cut, and the decay wrapped around the branch, which tells me that it was weak from the bottom, now it's weak from the side. So overall, you had more of a longer area that was a problem. Anyway, Jorge was climbing in the middle of the tree. I was up in the bucket. Oh, this was full of cement. And we'd spotted another spot that had cement in it. Decades ago, this was a very common practice to fill cavities with cement. And it's been shown that it is of not only no value, but makes it impossible to inspect the tree further on. There's another one of those cables. And, I'm just going through the tree showing you what I see. Now, one thing that every client wants is for you to be able to make the tree safe. And that's an impossibility. No tree is safe. You can make it safer. You can reduce some of the obvious risks. You can take out, diseased or weak limbs. You have to really look close at everything that you can see, but you have to be honest with your clients. You have to tell them if they've got a tree that is in the last stages of its life. But then again, I can't really predict the future. I cannot see underground. All I can do is make the best educated decisions from what I can see. Look at that. What a mess. This tree, it just had me shaking my head all day long. And I run into trees like this quite often. But this is really an old grandfather tree for this area. It's well over 100 years old. The house is about 60 years old. And you can tell when I showed you that earlier shot that the grade has been changed. So you start adding up all the problems. Now, one thing that the client did ask me was, should we remove this tree? That's a really tough one to answer, because if the tree falls down, of course you should remove the tree. I oftentimes am hesitant to throw that kind of a thought at it unless it's very, very clear. The people love this tree. They really love this tree. But I'm honest with them. I tell them there's so many problems that you can expect this tree to start declining, start going downhill. But, with all the big storms that we've been having, and especially from some of the stuff that I saw at that conference of all the other tree failures, it's really got me thinking, every big tree has the potential of being a problem. Oh, this is funny. Jorge was pulling his rope down, and how does this happen? But the rope spun around and tied itself on a knot on one of the cables. He was trying to get it down with the pole pruner, and he was trying to push that top piece down. He messed with it for about 5 minutes, and I decided I went over and I grabbed the pole saw, and I was able to get the underside of that knot with the sharp bit of the pole saw and pull the knot through and get it down. But what are the odds? Has that ever happened to you? Where a rope has tied itself on a knot when you're pulling it down and it gets stuck? Sometimes the weirdest things happen. I love this tree. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful tree. But there are risks to every old tree. Well, if you've stuck with me this long, I really appreciate it, and you must really love learning about trees. Just look at this branch. This is on an Atlas Cedar that we're working on, and it had an encapsulated dead branch that it had a little bit of life on it and grew all the way around it. Now, this is an interesting tree because the house is quite old. It was built in 1927, and the woman that we're working for has lived here since 1979. It was a pretty amazing tree. We've worked on it about a dozen times over the years. Basically, end weight, dead wood, broken branches. This time there was a couple of big cracked limbs and some weight over the roof and a few dead branches, but it was pretty much just basic management. Here's the house from the 1930s. That's the lower one in the bottom. That last picture showed the tree in the front yard in the 30s. So this tree is approximately 100 years old. There's Jorge out there working over the roof, tile roof. Had to be careful. He's tied in a couple of nice places. I really enjoy working with Jorge. We have a good camaraderie. We can understand each other quite well. It's just it's a partnership of understanding what each other needs. And that is kind of rare. So let's go take a look at another part of the property. I think you're going to really like this. Back behind the house, they have got a tree. It's a Pittosporum eugenoides, which is generally a shrub, but it's quite old. I'm guessing it's as old as the house. That's across the street, across the creek there. And the house has some big supports, but this support is actually supporting this tree. I've seen this many times, but I was just amazed by it. It's a big steel support from the ground all the way up, and it's embedded in a branch. So I went up and looked at it a little bit closer, and it's embedded in the limb. It's welded to this structure, and how he had to cut out the framework for the deck to allow for this giant tree to live with this house for such a long time. I mean, I've got kind of mixed emotions here. I see a lot of decay and a lot of problems at the base of the tree, including the mushroom there that was armillaria, which is called oak root fungus, and there's that cavity down there. And there's a lot of things going on that make me stop and wonder about the structural integrity of this tree. But it's kind of being supported by the deck and the steel prop here, and it's been living here for, this must be 100-year-old pittosporum. It's huge. I never see them of this size and this caliber. And it's still green. It's still living. So I got out and I walked around a little bit more, and I was looking at some of the adjacent trees in the property, and came down to a couple of redwoods right near the creek. One of them was still viable, but the other one had died, and somebody had topped it at some point in time. A lot of big trees around here. It's a different environment for me because it's the East Foothills, and I live over in the Santa Cruz Mountains area. So let's get back to the job at hand, and I wanted to show you what we're working on here. Back to the 360 camera. I'm having too much fun with this new toy. It was raining, so there are some drops of rain on the lens there. You can see what's going on. This is a fairly big tree. I really enjoyed working on this tree, and it was not a lot of work. We only actually worked there for half a day, and I left early. But tree seems to be in presentable condition. It's got an adequate amount of foliage. It's in pretty good shape. Here we got that picture of the building site, and that tree, the tall tree in the middle there, is the one we're working on. That was kind of a fun shot. So we wrapped up the job by about 1 o'clock, and it started raining on us really hard. But the tree looks in pretty good shape. I think we did an adequate job for a half a day job. But it's a significant old Atlas Cedar on an old estate property. And I've got a special maybe attachment to this tree because I've worked on it so many times over so many years. I get kind of involved in different trees. Yeah, this was kind of funny. There was a lawn, and the gardener or landscaper has put in sprinklers that were standing proud. I don't know if we broke it, but it was definitely broken. So I pointed it out to the client and told her what was going on. Actually, while I was there, I just pulled it out, and I was able to use my knife to pull the threads out and fix it.